Hey guys, today's video I'm going into a deeper subject. It's a type of subject that I know would not possibly fit if I talked about it appropriately in under 15 minutes, but I'm going to try my best to cover what I want to cover in about 15 minutes and we'll see where it goes. But overall today I wanted to talk about the impact of my generation specifically, which the way I usually classify it is like a very, very late millennial or a very, very early Zoomer, Gen Z, just because with my generation specifically, there is a decent mix of like both sides of those two generations. The millennial, where it's a lot of still old school ideas mixed with like the evolution of technology, whereas the Gen Z is very much a heavy technology user with like brand new, very fresh ideas that haven't been done before, or at least haven't been done in recent generations. So that's why I kind of put myself in the middle, because it's a generation of people that are very, very reliant on technology, but at the same time have some older school ideas. But anyway, I should also mention that everything I'm going to say comes from a perspective of a Northeast white male straight college student. So a lot of my opinion is very, very skewed in that aspect. I'm sure there's a lot of things I'm less aware of than people in other parts of the nation where the overall general surrounding of the environment might be less affluent, less literate, things like that. And it's no knock on any other state or area of the country, but it's just statistical fact. Speaking of statistics, I should also mention that nothing I say is supported by any kind of fact or statistics. This wasn't a deep dive research paper. It's just my general opinions and observations and what I've come to know to be a few facts and stuff, but nothing that I'm going to be citing sources or anything on. So, as always, I'm not an expert, and you shouldn't listen to anything I say. This is just me ranting about my opinions. But in any case, I'm going to jump in with hitting some things that I think my generation it has been more accepting of, and that will show a lot as we get older. The whole point of what I'm talking about here is the things that my generation values highly or is very integral to their lives, and how those kind of things might ultimately impact when they become later stage adults, which sounds weird, I'm making it sound like a disease, but later stage adults in the sense of, right now we're all young adults in the sense of going to college, starting our careers, things like that. A later stage adult, I'm talking more like starting a family, having kids, raising those kids, those kind of things. So yeah, let me start getting into it because I'm already starting to run along. But the first one that came to my mind was the acceptance of self-expression. That's a big thing in my generation specifically that started a bit with the millennials and has taken full force with the Generation Z. By self-expression, I'm talking about everything from tattoos to piercings to dyeing your hair to what you wear, all those kind of things. My generation is very, very accepting of. If anyone in my generation was the manager out of job or something, there's next to no possibility that they would likely turn someone away from the job just because they have a nose ring or they have a tattoo on their arm, things like that, which is something that I think a decent amount of millennials and for sure later on boomers and things like that have a very strong adversarial feel to. But this is a big change I've noticed, and for some reason that was the first thing that came to my mind and kind of started this. I think it was because I was talking about tattoos with someone recently, but in any case, that was the first thing I came up with. But then the second thing, which is definitely a much bigger topic for my generation, is the acceptance of self-choices, I'm going to call it. And by self-choice, I mean decisions that are ultimately the decision of the person that's making them, and no one else should really be part of those decisions, and it's not their business. So the big one in this topic, a big example would be abortion. In my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a good amount of the people in my generation, abortion should be the choice of the individual that's going through that decision and making that decision. That's something that it's still a very political decision and things like that, but it's something that a good amount of my generation is starting to lean more towards. In even the most conservative senses, that used to be that abortion was never okay no matter what. Even in the most conservative senses, there's a lot of conservative people that will backpedal a little bit and say, yeah, abortion's never okay unless maybe like you are sick and you need to get an abortion kind of thing. Which that in itself is a change that might now seem more like, oh, obviously, like if it's going to kill you to have this baby, then sure, I guess you need to get an abortion. But that's not something that was always true. That's something that very, very conservative older people still believe, like, no, you can never kill something, and a baby is something, like that whole thing. Also in this category, I'm including career decisions, which can range anywhere from sex work is a big topic in my generation. So making a career decision to go into more of a sex work thing, because there is good money in sex work, and there's some people that's their skill set. They were born very, very attractive, very noticeable physical features, and they don't mind the work associated with that. Sex work, talking of cam models and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get too far into it, but that's something my generation, I think, has become very, very accepting of. Also, career decisions, I'm going to talk about things like, I just had one on the top of my head, but it is what it is. I forgot it. The other big thing in self-choice is being LGBT, which is, I guess, I understand not as much of a self-choice, but identifying with that sexuality or that sexual preference of being gay or lesbian or bisexual, any of that. It's pretty much a fact that I think most people understand. Probably not. I shouldn't be making that assumption that being gay or lesbian or bisexual is not something you choose, like, oh, 13, I'm going to choose to be gay kind of thing. It's something that you're born with. It's a feeling you have, and there's not much you can do about it. But I think a big thing is accepting the choice, to be open about it, accepting that people are that way, that they might be different than them and have different sexualities and different feelings in them. And that's a big thing in my generation that I think is very valuable. And everything so far I've mentioned, I think, does have a very clear effect on later on, like when everyone in my generation starts having kids and making families. It's going to be extremely common to find gay and lesbian families with children, and or just partners that live long lives together. Like right now, it's very difficult to find examples of older couples that are gay and lesbian together, but I think that's something that changes a lot within my generation, and even a little bit in the millennial generation. But I think my generation is where it's really kicking off, because Gen Z is very, very supportive of those sexual preferences. And I'm trying to wrap back around to the career decision thing I was mentioning earlier, but I do know what it is. So big thing in my generation, which is a topic I talked about very recently, but the career decision to go into a trade career. There's starting to get the notion that all of my generation is going through college and realizing college is not meant for everyone. There's a strong push for people to accept individuals that make the decision to become a plumber, an electrician, a construction worker, these union type jobs, the blue collar jobs. There's a big thing in my generation of people supporting those kind of decisions, because we recognize that those might be better career paths than for an individual than going to college and doing that whole thing. I'm not going to get through nearly all the things I wanted to talk about, so I'm trying to pick through the things that I think are more important. I'm going to jump down near the bottom of my list. So I was talking about some things that are more accepting in my generation, some things that my generation is kind of pushing off, or I guess I'll call it denying more. The big one for me, I think, is religion. I think that religion is one of those things that is going to start to fade out after after my generation starts to reach adulthood, because I can't remember the last time I met someone, or it's exaggerating, but there's very, very few people I've met in my generation that consider themselves very religious, or even intend on raising their kids in a religious manner. If you're Christian, bringing them to Sunday school, getting them baptized and all that kind of stuff. And for me, Jewish is a big thing. So even people in my generation that want to raise their kids Jewish and send them to Hebrew school and have them bar mitzvah, all that kind of stuff, is very, very uncommon within my generation already. I think it started a bit in millennials, but my generation has become very uncommon. I think it's something that we might see start to fade out in the near future, which I think will have a very powerful impact on politics in general, which is something I'm going to wrap back around to. But even though there's supposed to be separation of church and state, all that, I think it's very clear that a lot of religious amendments and decisions and law influences how politics are run. Abortion is a very, very clear example of, ultimately, abortion, the decision to, abort a baby or not, is a very religiously charged topic. And that religiously charged topic has converted itself into a political topic, when realistically, at least in my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of my generation, is that it shouldn't be a political decision. It should be a personal decision between someone that is pregnant and wants to make a decision. But anyway, to move on to the next topic, a related note to the religion thing, but I'm going to call it the denial of the, that sounded aggressive, the denial of the American dream. And by that, I just mean, I think a lot of people in my generation are less awestruck by the idea of going through an American dream, nuclear family thing, where it's like, oh, you get married at 25, you have 2 kids, you raise them in a house with a white picket fence, the mom stays at home and cooks while the dad goes to his business job with his briefcase. That is being completely washed away very recently, and that definitely started with the millennials very clearly. But the big things are that, first of all, kids that in general are just being born less for people in my generation. There's a lot of adoption. There's a lot of families or couples that don't want to have kids or would rather raise, just be a couple without kids in the picture, which is their choice, their decision. Also, adoption is becoming, I think, a bit more popular. Not as popular as it should be. I'm a very, very big proponent of adoption. I would love to talk about that in another video. But especially with gay and lesbian couples that will likely, I can't imagine a way they would ever be able to have their own kid, unless they do a surrogate, something like that. A lot of adoption happens that way. Also, the idea of the homemaker, the wife staying at home to cook and clean while the husband's at work, that idea is definitely being washed out in my generation. Some bit out of necessity of needing to have 2 salaries to raise a family and needing to have 2 salaries to avoid living expenses and things like that, especially for lower income individuals, where you may have 2 people that are starting out their careers and they're not making as much as they thought they would, and they need more money to be able to buy houses and cars and things like that. Since I said I would wrap back around to it, this will probably be the last topic I talk on. Even though there was a lot I wanted to hit on, I'll just to mention those topics briefly. The 2 other things I want to talk about that I'm not going to really mention is the reliance on technology of my generation and the social media obsession of my generation. I think I've talked about both decent amounts, and I'll try and talk about them in another video. But the last topic I want to hit on is my generation's involvement in politics. And I think it's something that, personally, I think is a very good thing, that my generation is very, very aware of the political environment and how much politics matter in their daily lives. This is something that, for whatever reason, I think dropped out very steeply with the millennial generation. I think the millennials, for whatever reason, just didn't want to be part of politics. We're not involved in politics at all. And that's a very, very broad generalization. I understand that. But within my generation, and Gen Z has really started to take this by storm, is being heavily involved in politics in the sense of whether it's like actual supporting of candidates and things like that, or even just climate change, which has been a politically charged topic. My generation is very, very adamant about fighting for the things they believe in politically. And I think that that's something that has a very clear effect on later stage adulthood that I was mentioning earlier. Just when you're raising a family and voting and all that, that's going to matter a lot for my generation that is in that middle category of, sure, some of them believe that things shouldn't be political decisions. I think that's a millennial idea, that there's certain things that shouldn't be politics. It should just be law of the land. But a lot of my generation also has turned to the more Gen Z side of things, of saying the only way we're going to get this done is if we have young minds in politics and things like that, AOC, those kind of pushing for those kind of things. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up the video here so it doesn't take a million years to upload. But as always, I will thank you all for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.